Let me guess, you're teaching large groups online and it's been a complete disaster. You're very drained by the end of the lesson. It's 100% teacher centered. You have to talk for 1, 2, sometimes 3 hours. Some of your students are actually not participating in the class, and you know that because you call their names, they're not there, or it takes them a while to respond. None of them are keeping their cameras on, and you don't know if they're paying attention to the class or not. Or even worse, you have no idea if your learners are actually taking in anything you're teaching or not. If you're struggling with these problems, I have a tutorial that I think is going to be very useful to you. So, the first couple of group lessons or large group lessons that I taught online were a disaster. At least I felt they were a huge failure on my behalf because I felt so limited in terms of how I could get my learners attention, and especially on how I could tell if they really understood things that I had clarified, or if they were really coping with the language from the videos, or how I could get students to pay attention to my class if someone else was presenting or talking. This was very hard. And so I started thinking of different solutions, what I could come up with. And the best thing I found, and also the simplest idea on what you can use, is Microsoft Forms and Google Forms. Up until this time in my life, I viewed forms as something that you would use for creating forms. I didn't really think of forms as something that you could use to create worksheets. However, um, you can use both Google Forms and Microsoft Forms to create excellent worksheets. And I want to show you a couple of different ideas I've had with my worksheets that have allowed me to better understand my learners' needs, to propose a discussion between them, and also to get them to interact with each other. So I'm going to show you a couple of things I've done with Microsoft Teams. Most of my large group classes are classes that I teach on Microsoft Teams at the moment, which is the platform that the school where I work has chosen. If it was up to me, I would have chosen Zoom, but since they chose Microsoft Teams, I decided to learn as much as I could because I wanted to keep the level of quality that my students know me for. So what I'm going to show you is stuff I've done on Microsoft Teams. You can replicate the exact same things on Google Forms as well. So this first form was a worksheet that I had about this video. I wanted my students to watch the video and answer a couple of questions on the video. And what I found was that when I sent them the PDF, or when I sent them the video, or even if I played the video from my computer and I asked them to take notes on the answers, some of them didn't really seem to be doing the task, and I didn't know if it was either because it was really difficult and they didn't feel like they had the necessary support, or because they were just simply not willing to participate in class. So what I did is I transported the content that I had on the worksheet into Microsoft Forms, and I shared it with the students. So what you're seeing here is what my student received in terms of the task. You can do this using Teams by Microsoft. It's going to be on assignments, and you can do this also using your Google Classroom if you teach via Google Classroom. And then um, so I shared it with them and I gave them some time for them to do it. With Microsoft Teams, it's quite nice because you get a live update on how many students have completed the task and how long it's taken them. So as you can see, it took them an average of 6 minutes to complete the entire task. Now, what's really good about using these forms is that they give you insight on the answers. So if you look here, I can see what my students have selected as the correct answer. And I put the option of saying I don't know for students who didn't know the answer. So I already know which questions I 100% need to feedback on. Um, so this is very nice because I know that these are questions students don't know the answer to, and I can see that there's been a few questions which had quite a lot of contradictions, students disagreeing with each other. So instead of giving them the answers as soon as they finished, I actually had them talk to someone um, about what they've selected as the correct answer. And I gave them some time for them to play the video again if they needed to. This, I'm going to show you guys in a bit how you can get them to talk privately, but this worked really well. So as you can see, we've got 14 responses here. I can review all answers, and if I choose to review the answers, I can see how long it's taken my learner to answer the questions and also what they selected. And if they wrote some, I also assigned some written work so I could also see what they wrote in the end. So this worked really well if you want to play a video in class and you want to turn and you have a worksheet associated with that video. Do it as a form. Don't send PDFs and stuff because I believe you can provide more support and you can start a discussion with your students on the answers. Another thing you can use forms for is to get students to feedback on each other's work. So I had a class, for example, where I had students do a presentation. While students did the presentation, their classmates were supposed to pay attention and then provide feedback on a series of different criteria that I've established. I had them decide on a number of stars for each of the different topics covered. So here, for example, we had 7 responses, and this is what the classmates thought of these guys' presentations. So this was really nice. It didn't really take long. As you can see, it took 1 minute for them to complete. And it's the time that the next group needs to organize themselves to start the presentation. This was very nice. It allowed people who were watching the presentation to also engage with the presentation and feel like they had an active role in paying attention to what their classmate was doing. Also, if you want to have a discussion on a topic, so we were covering presentations, as I said, and before they did the presentation, a couple of classes before, I wanted them to know what I expected from that presentation. So I created this. It's basically a quiz. So there are no right or wrong answers. So I guess it's not a quiz. It's just a survey, and students were supposed to tell me what they thought. What's interesting about this is you can use this type of form to start a discussion between your students. So in this class, for example, I had 13 students. They all answered the questions, and once they provided the answers, I had their opinion. So here I have metrics on what students thought, and I had plenty of room to start a discussion. I can take, for example, so if you look here, two students thought it was a good idea to read. I could actually call their names at feedback and ask them to explain why they thought it was a good idea. Um, with this, for example, one student didn't think following a plan was a good idea, so he had a different opinion from most people. Let's see why he has that opinion, and then you can also have someone who has a more similar opinion from most of the class to give their opinion as well. So this is a really nice way to start a discussion with students. It's a really nice way for you to see what they think and for you to select what to feedback on at that stage. So this worked really well. So basically, if you transfer your worksheets into Google Forms and Microsoft Forms, you will be able to get metrics. You will be able to see what your students answered, and you will be able to see who made a mistake, who has a different opinion. You will get much more content for you to work on at feedback. And I dare say you will have an even more accurate picture of what your learners have managed to grasp or not than you would face to face, because it's really well organized in graphs for you. So all you need to do is look at the graphs and just see what you can get from your class. And once again, don't forget you're doing your best. It's really hard teaching groups online, especially if you've never done it before, but I'm sure you can do it. If you have any questions, any different ideas, anything you'd like to share with me, please post a comment. I would love to hear from you guys. I hope to see you all soon. Bye bye.